article that came out July 3rd, 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, going to jail is no longer an urban thing. It is no longer urban. Going to jail now is a rural thing. In rural areas, jail populations are skyrocketing, including pre-trial detainees. It is so bad with the drugs and crime in rural areas. This population of people in America are now going to jail more than any place else in this country. Now, here's the thing. Not only are the crimes going through the roof, now I did another story that's saying that many of these areas, they're having a hard time getting law enforcement to even work in these areas. So what these people do, they sell their drugs in rural areas where they know police are not going to show up. That's what's happening now. And a lot of their crimes are tied to the opioids, which we all know, as I stated before, when you are a junkie, eventually you are going to run out of money. And when you run out of money to get your drugs, you're going to turn to crime. That's usually how it happens. All right. So in many of the jurisdictions in rural areas, the crime is now skyrocketing. In a newspaper published by the Texas Public Policy Foundation, it now shows that jail populations in counties of all sizes have grown substantially. By one estimate, America's jail population was 5 times higher in 2013 than it was in 1970. Such expansive growth in urban, suburban, and medium to small size counties plateaued and began falling in 2005. However, growth in rural jails has continued. So they're acknowledging in the urban, suburban, and medium to small counties, crime is now plummeting. It's going down. The only place that it's rising in right now are the rural areas. Even in general terms, this sort of expansion puts strain on a smaller jurisdiction's infrastructure. Jail hold recently arrestees and those serving short sentences. In addition to pre-trial detainees, prisons handle those serving long sentences, but pre-trial population in particular have grown as well, which presents us with additional questions. In Texas, for example, almost 33% of the jail population comprise pre-trial detainees in 1994. However, by 2016, that proportion had grown to almost 74%. The national average currently stands at roughly 66%, up from about 50% in 1993. Why has this happened? An increase in rural crime, perhaps the most obvious possibly, does not seem to explain it. And one of the most significant public feats in our history, overall crime rates have trended down to their lowest levels in decades since mid-1990s. While the drop has been most dramatic in cities, and this is why I'm keep telling you, stop listening to this crap about black on black crime. Crime has been steadily dropping for the last few decades in the black community. Crime is not going up. Okay, the only ones that are telling you that crime is bad in the black community are coons and white supremacists. But when you look at the actual data, crime is steadily decreasing all over the country in black communities. It's not rising. Okay? if you listen to them, it's rising in the Black community, but in their community, it's not bad. But when you see these stories, it's actually the opposite. It's really worse in these rural areas than anywhere else in the country right now. All right, let's get back to the story. Okay, so, or perhaps the key factor is a lack of court personnel available to evaluate individual defendants, which leads them to being detained until their trials. In rural areas, this is particularly acute, even spurring some states to offer subsidies for qualified individuals willing to do this work. The large distances in some circuit judges must travel to cover multiple jurisdictions also creates a logjam of court cases. Economic factors can play a role too. Many local officials have built out additional beds to house inmates of other jurisdictions in order to receive daily per diems, which are commonly used to shore up flagging budgets and create a political constituency for excessive pretrial detention. Such was with experience in Grant County, Kentucky. Kentucky seems to be one of those places that comes up a lot. I guess crime must be seriously bad in that area, which bore two relevant consequences. First, the general use of pre-trial detention quadrupled. Second, their daily per diem dried up after an abuse scandal rippled through the system, and the state removed its prisoners, leaving local taxpayers to foot the bill on construction costs for jail space they no longer needed. So, how do you fix this thing unless you fix the opioid situation? And we know they're not going to fix that. Another likely cause is the ongoing opioid plague. National data don't exist to directly attribute rural jail admissions to opioid-related arrests. You know what? They're not keeping tabs and records on this, ladies and gentlemen, on purpose. They're doing this on purpose. But if you notice, whatever crime they find in the Black community, they make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. But when it's in their areas, oh, well, no data is kept on this, and no data is, we don't keep data on that. They're doing that on purpose. Nonetheless, there has been a notable rise in drug arrests coinciding with the grim increase in opioid addiction. There is no way of avoiding this, ladies and gentlemen. Opioids is tied to all of this. And it is attributing to the crime rise and all of the violence that's going on in the rural areas. Right now, your rural area, that's where most of your violent crimes are taking place. Rural counties in Kentucky experience a 38% increase in heroin arrests between 2013 and 2016 alone, while heroin offenses in Ohio increased by a whopping 125% between 2011 and 2014. These are just two states. Small county jails do not commonly possess the infrastructure allowing them to absorb such a significant upward swing in new detainees on a daily basis or to release defendants under supervision. Therefore, more people remain in detention because sensible alternatives don't exist. So they are literally stuffing these people in jail and technically don't have the space for them. So this is why they're saying that, many of them, they have to take to other jurisdictions because in these rural areas, they just simply don't have the space and they don't have the manpower in those areas to watch over those prisoners. Just as there are a myriad reasons for pretrial population growth, there are many possible solutions. The first is a necessity. There should be a presumption of release unless government can clearly articulate, preferably through validated risk assessment. So, they want to assess whether somebody is a flight risk. This person, if we release them, they're going to take off and we won't see them again, or somebody that we know will show up for trial. That's what they're saying. Using risk assessment to better inform judicial release decision is well supported by data. In the first 6 months after Kentucky adopted a new statewide risk assessment in 2013, the share of defendants released before trial rose slightly, from 68% previous 4 years to 70%. While new criminal activity by those released dropped by 15%. Court appearance remained stable during this period. In Texas, a recent comparison study by the Public Policy Research Institute showed that pre-trial defendants released in the county using a validated risk assessment tool committed 53% fewer violent felonies than those released from the county that relied on financial bail. Such data showed that risk assessment do a better job in preventing both types of misclassifications, detaining lower risk defendants who should be released and releasing higher risk defendants who should be detained. America also has too many criminal laws, and I agree with that. Some of these things they got on the book shouldn't even be laws, okay? They done got so carried away with putting people in jail for that prison labor that they got too many things on the books in this country that should never have been considered a crime in the first place. And that's another major issue that you're dealing with in America. And those laws were created for us. We know why those remedial laws are on there. It's for us. America also has too many criminal laws. In Texas alone, there are more than 1,700 statutory offenses, and only 2 do not commonly result in arrests. States should seek to reduce the number of these offenses that carry a possibility of jail time, allowing cases to be dispensed of more rapidly. And I agree with that. Pre-booking police diversions, such as the law enforcement assisted diversion program pioneered in Seattle, represents an opportunity to identify individuals who may not need to be brought to jail, particularly for low-level drug offenses, which the majority of Black people are in jail for. Very minimal drugs found on them, and they get these astronomical sentences. And they really shouldn't be in jail at all. Many of those cases could be resolved other ways where it does not involve prison. But because we have a private prison system in America, they have to constantly keep stacking bodies in there to get that slave labor done. Okay, and that's why they're piling you in there. Studies show that lead reduces, well, let me just go down. There has been a notable tenor mounting across the country that rural areas have been forgotten in the hustle and bustle of American life. Growth in rural jails has been no different. We should use this recognition as an opportunity to reverse course. We need to protect public safety and ensure defendants' appearance in court, but the presumption of pretrial liberty must not get lost in the din. So, ladies and gentlemen, the people going to jail in rural areas is exploding in the country. And it's exploding because that is where a lot of your drugs in America are concentrated. And just like during the crack epidemic, when crack was going through the roof, crime was going through the roof. And you can see the same thing is happening in rural America. It's really no different at all. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. I'll leave the link to this article in the description box. Please leave your comment and subscribe. If you can support my channel, please do. And I will see you guys on the next video. Peace, family.